Okay, it's 101. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. We are very happy to have you join us today for this webinar. My name is Barbara Lopez. I am the TGA coordinator, and I will go ahead and introduce our presenter today for our webinar, Mr. Leonard James III. Leonard James holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Statistics from the University of Alabama and a Master of Business Administration degree from Louisiana State University. Leonard is a certified private professional guardian and family guardian for his son. He's a Texas State Supreme Court appointee to the Guardianship Certification Advisory Board to the Judicial Branch Certification Commission. Leonard has dedicated time, money, and effort to TGA and has answered the call of the Public Policy Committee to provide testimony at legislative hearings. He started his professional career in 1973 and worked 38 years for Exxon and ExxonMobil Corporation before retiring in 2012. Following his retirement, Leonard launched J3 Advisory Group, a strategic planning, communications, and relationship building consulting firm. He consistently has held or holds key positions within several professional, civil, and social organizations, including National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, National Board of Directors, HCA, Houston Healthcare, Northwest Board of Trustees, JBCC Guardianship Certification Advisory Board, Guardianship and Technology Steering Committee, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board of Directors, and President and CEO of the Greater Houston Black Chamber of Commerce. Before we move on, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. It's towards the left side. On the bottom of your screen. Again, the Q&A, feel free to type your question and then Mr. James will address them throughout the presentation as well as at the end. Okay. And now, Mr. James, the floor is yours.
Barbara, thank you very much for the introduction and good afternoon, and let me welcome each of you to today's Texas Guardianship Association webinar to provide you as family guardians with information on the annual report filing requirements. As Barbara mentioned, I am a family guardian. I am the proud father of William Lowell James, and it is my purpose and passion to do whatever it takes to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities receive the greatest care that they can. So with that, I want to go ahead and begin the presentation. As Barbara mentioned, at any point in time during the course of the presentation, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll be more than happy to answer those. Barbara, if I could have the first slide, please. Our objectives for today are we're trying to cover a number of things. We'd like, once again, to talk about the annual report filing requirements, who we as individuals, what we need to do to file the annual reports, how to fill those out. We'll also talk a little bit about all of the annual report filings in terms of the timeframes to file the various reports, whether you are a guardian of the person or a guardian of the estate. As Barbara mentioned earlier, throughout our conversation today, if there is a question, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll make every effort to answer them. If not, at the end of the presentation, we will have more of a formal Q&A session. Barbara, if I could have the next slide, please. I mentioned earlier, one of our objectives for today is to review the filing requirements. As you can see on this slide, the filing requirements are actually governed by the Texas Estate Codes, and it sets out in sections 1163.101 through 105, sets out the requirements for the yearly filing of a written report that contains information about the ward subject to the guardianship of the person as well as guardianship of the state. Now, Texas laws requires each of us who serve as guardians of the person to file the report in its entirety every year that the guardianship is in place, and it happens to cover a 12-month reporting period, with the reporting period beginning on the date that you qualify to serve as guardian. The next bullet point gives you an example of the timing. If the judge granted your guardianship on October the 10th, 2023, then your reporting period would most likely be October the 10th through October the 10th for each year. And your annual report is due between October the 10th and December the 10th of each year. I would simply point out the statute is very specific about when you can initiate the filing. In this example, October the 10th would be the initiation of the filing. You cannot file on October the 9th, October the 8th, or anything prior to October the 10th. I did that one year, and my annual report was returned to me. I thought I was doing something wonderful by filing it a couple of weeks in advance, but I just share that as a point of personal experience. If the date says that it was effective on a date, you cannot file it before that date. Barbara, could I have the next slide, please? Now, Texas laws requires a guardian of the estate also file an annual accounting, which indicates the total value of the estate, any claims that are against the estate, changes to the estate assets, all revenues and incomes received by the guardian, disbursements that we as guardians would make, and total non-cash assets administered by the guardians. One of the other unique features is that courts do not routinely send out notices for upcoming annual reports, and that is also specific not only for filing for your as a guardian of the estate, but that also will be applicable if you're filing for a guardian of the person. Barbara, could I have the next slide, please? Who needs to file the annual guardianship reports? Guardians appointed by state probate courts to oversee the personal and financial affairs of an individual deemed incapacitated or in need of protection. In other words, all of us as family guardians, since we are appointed by a Texas court, we have to file on an annual basis. Texas probate court officials who are responsible for monitoring and supervising guardianships to ensure the welfare and protection of vulnerable individuals is another class that also has to file an annual report. As family members, legal representatives, or stakeholders involved in the guardianship who require updated information on the ward's well-being, assets, and decision-making is a third classification that is required to file the annual report. Barbie, if I could have the next slide, please. How do we go about filling out the annual report? And I'm certain that, like myself, several of you has done this before, but I just want to spend a few minutes kind of going over how we go about completing the report. First, we have to gather all of the information and documents that are related to the guardianship case, and those will include any court orders, any financial records, and any changes to the ward's health and or living conditions. We need to carefully review the guidelines and requirements provided by the state probate court for filling out the annual report. And that becomes very critical because at some point in time, they may end up changing, but we need to make sure that we are up to date on all of the guidelines and requirements provided by the state as we begin to fill out the annual report. Next slide, Barbara. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about what all goes into the report. You confirm that one of the most important things is that we need to confirm that we are using the most up-to-date version of the document. and you'll need to make sure that you compare any document that you may have saved to the document that is the most recently updated to your probate court's web page to ensure that you're using the most recent version. Again, just as a point of personal privilege, and from my experience, I have in the past submitted a report uh, on a form that was outdated simply by 1 year. The form was returned, but I point that out again just to make sure that everyone's aware. You will need to go to the court's web page just to make sure that you're filling out using the right report before you submit. You begin by entering basic information about the guardianship, and that includes our name as the guardian, the name of the ward, the date that the guardianship was established, and as we all know, each guardianship has a specific court case, and you will need to enter that on the annual filing report. You'll also need to enter and provide detailed updates on the ward's personal well-being and living conditions, and that will include any changes to her or his physical or mental health, medical care that has been received. Typically, it includes a recap of when they have been seen most recently by physicians and any significant events or incidents that have occurred during the reporting period. Next slide, please, Barbara. Guardianship of the person annual report filing, we'll spend a little bit more time talking in greater detail. In this case, we detail the ward's financial situation, including any income received, any disbursements or expenses that were incurred, any changes in the overall asset value or benefits received, and we need to make sure to include all supporting documentation, such as bank statements, receipts, and invoices. The annual report should also include a summary of the activities and decisions made on behalf of the ward during the reporting period. As an example, medical appointments, education or vocational activities, and any legal or administrative actions that have been taken during the reporting period. You will end up signing and dating the annual report, which will certify that the information that you have provided is both true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. You are not required to have this form notarized. I want to repeat that. You are not required to have this form notarized. Once the form has been completed, you submit the annual report to the Texas Probate Court, and you can do it either by mail or direct delivery in person to the court within the specified deadlines. The other thing that I'd like to point out here is that we as family guardians, we can fill out this report, retaining the advice of legal counsel to assist you in completing the report is not a state requirement. Again, on a personal note, I fill out all the annual reports involving my son, and I do not retain the services of legal counsel. But I know there has been some questions in the past as to whether or not legal counsel needs to be retained to complete and submit the report, but we are not required as guardians to retain legal counsel to do that. Next slide, Barbara. We spent some time talking about filing the annual report as a guardian of the person. I want to spend a little bit of time in the next few minutes talking about the guardianship of the estate annual filing. While there are a lot of similarities, there are some differences in the process to refile this report as well. You do begin by entering the basic information about the guardianship, just as we did in the other report, including our name as the guardian, the name of the ward, the date of the guardianship, and the court case number. That's identical to the last couple of slides that we talked about filing the guardianship of the person. Similarly to the filing the other report, you detail the ward's financial situation, including the beginning estate values, any properties not previously reported to the court. We also have to report all claims against the estates, changes in the estate assets, revenues and income received on behalf of the wards, disbursements of the estates, non-cash assets administered, any cash on hand, and any debts and expenses of the estate. If you are the representative payee, you also have to complete the representative payee report and submit to the Social Security Administration. Next slide, Barbara. Now, this is a difference, and while it is not that difficult to get this part of the filing done, it does require some prior planning. You have to have an officer of the financial institutions, and I'll put an S on that, to certify deposits as well as securities when you submit the annual accounting report. So you will do a recap, and then you'll have to go to the financial institution and get that institution to certify the information that you're submitting lines up and reconciles against their financial records there at the financial institution. Just like the other submission, you'll sign and date the annual accounting, certifying that the information that we're providing is true and accurate to the best of our knowledge. Once the form is completed, once again, you can mail it or deliver it to the county clerk's office by the specified deadline. I know we've covered a lot of information, maybe fairly quickly, so I want to pause here. And Barbara, do we have any questions in the Q&A sessions that we need to address at this point in time?
No questions yet.
Okay, Barbara, let's then transition over to a couple of summaries that I've prepared that I hope everyone on the call will find of value as you go about filling out the annual reports. The first thing that I wanted to kind of summarize are the guardianship requirements for the guardian of the person. Remember, we talked about that the guardian of the person annual report should always include current living arrangements, evaluation of the arrangements, and that becomes very important in the event there needs to be any change in the guardian's living arrangement. The guardian's current physical, mental condition. As a guardian, you'll be asked to evaluate that on behalf of the ward. Who controls the income and estate? Obviously, that is typically the guardian in some cases if you are not the rep payee. Some of the assets or the Social Security accounts may in some cases be controlled by the program manager, or in the event you're in a long-term care facility. An evaluation of unmet needs is also a part of the filing. Statement regarding the continued need of the guardianship, and this becomes also an important part of the annual report, just to confirm that a guardianship is still required, and is there maybe a less restrictive alternative to guardianship. So this report gives you an opportunity to also make those things. And there's also a documentation that the Bill of Rights has been provided and explained to the person under the guardianship. I just highlighted down in red at the bottom of the slide that we do need to remember these requirements, because they do become very critical as we go about filing the annual reports of the person. Barbara, again, I want to take a quick pause here and determine whether or not we have any questions as it relates to any of these reporting requirements for guardianship of the person. Any questions?
Nothing in the Q&A at the moment.
Okay, I didn't know we were doing that good a job, Barbara, but that's great. Next slide, Barbara, and we'll talk a little bit about the annual report for the estate annual report filing. And this is, again, is just a summary of what we talked about earlier. Regarding of the person annual report should include all of the bullet points that you see below. There has to be a ledger of the account activities for every account with the accompanying exhibits. Remember, I mentioned that you will have to go to the financial institution and make sure that those financial exhibits are certified. A recap or reconciliation of all income that has been received, any gains or losses that are the result of changes in the estate, any expenditures, disbursements that have been made against the estate. Once again, an evaluation of unmet needs. There is a value at the end of the accounting period, and there's copies of documentation to verify. Once again, I just highlighted the fact that we will all need to keep in mind and remember these requirements as we go about filing. Any questions on the filing of the estate annual accounting summary that goes in on an annual basis, either to the court or to Social Security if, in fact, you're the representative payee? Barbie, do you have any questions in the Q&A?
Nothing yet.
Okay, Barbara, if we could have the next slide. On this slide, I just recap some references that you may find useful. And these are the email addresses for the Texas Guardianship Association, the National Guardianship Association, and the Texas Office of Court Administration. Although it's not included on this slide, I'd like to, at this point in time, share my email address and my mobile number if anyone ever has a question or needs to reach out to me personally. My email address is ljames, LJAMES, 323 at me.com. Let me repeat that again. ljames, 323 at me.com. My mobile phone number is 713-248-9836. 713-248-9836. As we mentioned earlier, although this will conclude the portion of the presentation, we did allow some time for open forum question and answers. So I'd like to open the floor for any questions, and I'll make every effort to answer them at this point in time. In the event that I'm unable to do so, if we could capture your contact information, I'll make sure that we follow up and get a response to your question if we're unable to answer it during the webinar today. Any questions?
You can please type your question in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hand. There's an option for that on the right bottom side of your screen as well.
Barbara, I'm assuming the participants, since you mentioned the chat, they do have an opportunity to respond in the chat. Is that correct?
Yes, in the Q&A.
Okay, I'm going to kind of flip the tables to our participants.
Yeah.
Show of hands or give Barbara some feedback in the chat. How many of you have actually filed an annual report of the person before? Could we have a response that goes in the chat on that, please? Trying to get a head count as to how many people have actually filed the annual report before. And Barbara, I do see that we have
Yes.
maybe one question.
Yes, while people answer your question that you just asked, we did get a question from Melissa. Do the annual reports vary between the different counties? Great question.
It is a great question, and thank you for that question. The basic report is the same. The information that we covered in the presentation is governed by Texas code. So yes, the information is the same by county that you will be submitting. Now, the format may change a little bit, but I would share with you that last year there was a change. Um, and the form that I have seen is identical county by county. And if you would like to have a copy of that, if you could share your email with Barbara, I'll make sure that you get a copy of at least within Harris County where I reside so that you can use that as a template. Does that answer your question?
We'll see what they say, but we did get yes. Okay, Melissa said yes, thank you. We do have another question that came through from Deborah. You haven't mentioned this, but I'm wondering why the annual report asks for the personal information of the guardian. I am worried about fraud with my personal information, like my date of birth and address.
Yes, and another very good question. One of the concerns, and I understand the question because at least in the state of Texas, all guardianship information is public information. Said another way, when it is filed, anyone can go into the probate court records and open up that information. So I understand the sensitivity about sharing your personal information. Unfortunately, it is required as a part of the reporting process. I've never personally experienced anything negative from providing a home address or contact phone number, but I do understand the question, but it is a requirement on that annual document. It's probably used more by the courts to contact you as a guardian in the event there is any questions or follow-up that they need to do. I'm also, in the past, when I filed my annual reports, I get a call from the court investigator who has either visited my son in the residential home where he resides or the activity center to discuss the evaluation that has occurred as a part of the courts investigating the guardianship as well. So that's another reason for providing a contact phone number and maybe an email address on those forms. Barbie, is there another question?
Not yet. And Leonard, just kind of piggybacking off of that, I have a question for you. So in my experience, has been for the most part with, a public agency, and although the information is the same, I have never seen where we have been required to include date of birth of the guardian. So for you as a family guardian, is that something that you have to include your personal date of birth, not the ward, but your own?
No, I've never been asked to give my personal date of birth other than doing the process of when the guardianship was
Right.
established so the court could
Right.
do the investigative background.
Okay.
But the annual report, my date of birth is not necessary. It's just general contact information where I can be located in the event the court needs to talk to me.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify since that was part of the question from Deborah. Okay.
Did we get any response to my question about maybe how many of us on the call have filed an annual report? I don't know. Do we have a group that's used to filing, or do we have any newly appointed guardians that have never had to file an annual report? Primarily, I guess, of the estate, which is a totally different reporting scenario altogether.
No, we have no answers yet, but y'all are more than welcome to type your answer in the Q&A box.
Well, I'm going to assume then that everyone on the call is very experienced in filing the annual report then. And that more importantly, we're doing them all on time so that when the court's records are reviewed, we will show that all of the annual reports are being filed consistent with the reporting guidelines.
Okay, Kevin said we file about 100 a year.
Okay, so Kevin may work with a program then.
Perhaps, or maybe an attorney.
Yes.
Trisha, she's with Covenant Outreach. She said, do you mind going over new info requirements that cover the support and services?
Barbara, I'm going to need you to help me out a little bit. I'm not
Mhm.
sure if I understand the question.
Okay, I'll repeat it again. Do you mind going over new info requirements that cover the supports and services? And Trisha, I can go ahead and unmute you if you want to just kind of elaborate a little bit for Leonard. Give me just 1 second. Okay, you're able to talk, Trisha.
Hi, thank you. I'm with the program Covenant Outreach, and some of our newer agents that we are working on doing annual reports. There's the new requirements, kind of like in section 19, where it talks about the ward has received support and services. And this is newer to our program for the requirement to kind of give more updated information on local health, support and services under Medicaid, as well as informal services and supports. And I kind of wanted to see if there's any, especially in our smaller communities where there's not a whole lot of additional services in the community, what are some things that y'all see in your areas for those supports and services? So we may be able to look into some of our surrounding areas to be able to add for our wards to be able to benefit from.
Yeah, Tricia, thank you for that additional clarification. And again, as a family guardian, I can only speak and give you some references as it relates to my son. In addition, obviously, to the medical supports and services, the program that my son is involved in actually publishes a monthly calendar of activities for all of the clients' awards that they represent. As a matter of fact, today he's at a movie with a number of other clients, but I see on a monthly basis a activities calendar that will different supports and services, different things to get the individuals back out into the public domain. I do make a point when I complete the annual report for my son, making sure the court knows that it is a part of the support services that the program that he's involved in provides for all of their clients. So those are the types of support services that I'm personally used to as it relates to the care of my son.
Thank you.
We do have a question. Where do we email to get a copy of the presentation? I can go ahead and Leonard, if you allow me to share it, I can go ahead and send that out to all the attendees by email.
Yes, that's fine. And again, if you did not record my email address or my mobile number, it is not in the presentation. But again, my email address is ljames323@me.com. My mobile number is 713-248-9836. And I am more than happy to accept an email, text message, or a phone call and assist anyone in any way that I can. Barbara, was that the last question?
I think so. Nothing else has come through.
Okay, well, Barbara, before turning it back over to you, let me thank everyone for being on the call with us today. This to me is my life's now purpose and passion. It's making sure that we adequately represent our family members, our loved ones, making sure that they get the absolute best care possible. And I would just like to leave you with this because I consider now each and every one of you who participated in this call family and friends. So before turning it back over to Barbara, if you'll remember this, there are tall ships, there are short ships, there are ships that sail the seas, but guardians, the best ship is our friendship, and may that always be. Thank you for participating in today's session.
Okay, well, that concludes the webinar for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Stay tuned to our upcoming webinars. And you should be getting your certificate by email within the next 2 weeks. You'll get an email either from me or from Lisa. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Leonard. Appreciate you.
Everyone have a safe and blessed day now.